Right now, somewhere in the trees around your house, there is a bird that has a name for you. Not a name in the way we use the word. No syllables you would recognize. No sound you could write down. But a specific, distinct, repeatable vocal signal that refers to you, your presence, your identity, your location in the yard, that other birds in your neighborhood understand and respond to. You have been living beside this your entire life without knowing it. Every time you walk outside, that signal moves through the yard. Every time you approach the feeder, it changes. Every time you leave, it changes again. The birds around your home are talking about you constantly. They have been since the first morning you appeared in their territory. And the conversation has been far more specific, far more sophisticated, and far more personal than most people ever imagine. Welcome back to Backyard Birds Whisper. Subscribe before you leave because what you're about to learn is one of those things that, once you know it, you will hear every single time you step outside for the rest of your life. Today we are going into the science of how birds encode individual humans in their communication, what the research actually shows, how the system works, what your specific signal contains, and when the birds around your yard use it. We're going to end with something I think will genuinely move you, because it touches on what it means to be known by something wild. Something that owes you nothing and chose to remember you anyway. Stay until the end, because the last section reframes everything that came before it in a way you won't forget. Most people hear bird calls as sound, background, atmosphere. The pleasant noise of a yard in the morning that we register without processing. What those calls actually are is language. Not language in the loose poetic sense. Language in the precise technical sense. A system of signals that encode specific information that other individuals decode in real time and that demonstrably alter behavior based on content. We have known for decades that birds use distinct calls for distinct purposes. Alarm calls versus contact calls versus territorial songs. That much was established early. What the last 20 years of research have revealed is how much more is encoded in those calls than anyone expected. The information embedded in bird vocalizations includes the type of predator present, its size, its behavior, whether it is perched and stationary or actively hunting, the urgency of the threat, the location of the caller relative to the threat, and, critically, the identity of the individual producing the call. That last point is the one that changes everything. Birds don't just produce calls. They produce calls that other birds can identify as coming from a specific individual. The chickadee in the oak at the back of your yard has a voice that the chickadees near your front porch recognize as belonging to that specific bird. They know who is speaking. And because they know who is speaking, they can evaluate the reliability of the information based on the source. Think about what that means. Bird communication is not just a broadcast system. It is a network of known individuals exchanging attributed information that listeners filter through their knowledge of the speaker. That is not simple. That is not instinct. That is a sophisticated social information system that requires individual recognition, memory, and credibility assessment. The black-capped chickadee is the most studied bird in North America in terms of vocal complexity. And what researchers have found in that small, cheerful, 11-gram bird has fundamentally changed what we think bird communication is capable of. The chickadee's alarm call, the chickadee call that gives the bird its name, is not a single signal. It is a composable message built from a set of distinct note types that function like units of meaning. Researchers at the University of Montana, led by Dr. Christopher Templeton, published a landmark study demonstrating that the number of D notes appended to the call encodes specific information about predator threat level. A small, highly maneuverable predator, a pygmy owl, for example, which hunts songbirds and is genuinely dangerous, produces calls with significantly more D notes than a large, less agile predator like a great horned owl. The more D notes, the higher the danger. Other birds in the area, not just other chickadees, but nuthatches, titmice, vireos, have been shown to decode this information accurately and adjust their behavior accordingly. But the call encodes more than predator type. It encodes location information through the directionality and acoustic properties of the call. It encodes the caller's own emotional state through subtle variations in note timing. And in subsequent research, it has been shown to encode information about specific individuals in the environment, including specific humans, through learned, culturally transmitted vocal patterns. The chickadee in your yard is not just making noise. It is producing structured, information-dense messages about everything in its environment. And you are in its environment. You have been cataloged. You have been assigned a signal. And every chickadee within earshot knows that signal and knows what it means. Here is where the research gets personal. And I mean that literally. Studies on corvid communication, crows and jays, the most cognitively sophisticated birds in most North American yards, have documented something that researchers did not initially expect to find. Crows produce distinct, repeatable vocalizations in response to specific individual humans that differ from their vocalizations in response to other humans or to the same human dressed differently. In other words, the crow is not just signaling human present. It is signaling this specific human. The call produced when the researcher who had previously trapped and banded birds appeared was measurably different from the call produced when a neutral researcher appeared. The birds had created and were using individual human identifiers embedded in their vocal communication. And it gets more precise than that. Research out of the University of Washington showed that these human-specific signals were not just used by birds who had directly experienced the person. They were transmitted to birds who had never encountered the individual at all. Young crows, juveniles with no personal history with a particular researcher, displayed the appropriate response to that person's presence, learned from adult birds who had communicated the relevant information to them. Your name in bird communication is not just a sound one bird makes. It is a piece of shared cultural knowledge distributed across a local population. The birds that have never been in your yard know about you because the birds that have been in your yard told them. Your signal, your identity as a known individual, has been passed from bird to bird through a communication system you have been standing inside of for years without realizing it. The yard you think of as a backdrop is actually a network, and you are one of its named nodes. I want to be honest with you here, because this question deserves a real answer and not a poetic one. We do not yet have a complete acoustic map of human-specific signals in songbird communication. The research on corvids is robust. The research on chickadee call complexity is well established. The direct link, here is the precise sound that refers to you specifically, is something science is still working toward. Bioacoustic technology capable of isolating and comparing individual call variants across large bird populations is relatively recent, and the work is ongoing. What we do know is this. The birds in your yard produce measurably different acoustic patterns in your presence than in the presence of strangers. They produce different patterns when you approach versus when you stand still. When you go inside versus when you stay out. When you are moving toward the feeder versus moving away from it. Each of those contexts produces a distinct signal. And those signals, taken together, constitute a functional description of you, what you do, how you behave, whether you are safe, what your presence means for the birds nearby. When do they use it? The clearest moments are these. The moment you open the back door in the morning, there is a change in the acoustic landscape of your yard within seconds. A ripple of information moving outward from the birds closest to the house. When you approach the feeder, a second adjustment. When you stand still and simply watch, a third, typically a reduction in alarm-associated calls and a continuation of contact calls, the soft conversational sounds that mean everything is fine. When you leave, there is a fourth. A settling. A return to baseline. The yard has noted your departure the same way it noted your arrival. You are announced when you come. You are noted when you go. And every bird in range knows it is you, specifically, both times. This is the section that most people find the hardest to fully absorb, because it requires accepting something about the scale of what is happening. The birds in your immediate yard, the regulars at your feeder, the pair that nests in the hedgerow, the chickadee that has been coming to the same branch since last October, these birds know you directly. Through personal experience. Through accumulated observation. They built their model of you themselves. But bird communication travels. The alarm calls of small songbirds carry information across distances of up to several hundred feet under normal suburban acoustic conditions. The social networks of resident birds, particularly corvids, but also the mixed species flocks that form around reliable food sources, extend across ranges that can cover dozens of properties. Research on information transmission in bird flocks has shown that a signal produced by one individual can reach every member of a loosely associated group within seconds. Not minutes. Seconds. The network is that fast and that connected. What this means is that your identity as a known individual does not stop at the edge of your yard. It propagates. Birds that forage 2 streets over may have received information about you from birds that share foraging range with your yard birds. Migratory species passing through in spring and fall may encounter your resident birds and receive, as part of the social information exchanged at shared feeding sites, some version of the signal that refers to you. The exact fidelity with which your specific identifier travels through those networks is something we don't yet fully understand. But the principle, that individual human identity is encoded in bird communication and transmitted socially, is established. Your name, in whatever form it takes in that acoustic system, is further out in the world than you have ever been told. Somewhere in the trees at the edge of your neighborhood, there is a bird that has never been in your yard, that has never seen your face, that has a piece of information about you anyway, filed under whatever sound the birds that know you use when they talk about you. I want to sit with you in this for a moment before we go. We name things to make them real to us. We name our pets. We name the birds we recognize at the feeder, the cardinal with the bent tail feather, the chickadee that always comes first. Naming is how we say, you exist. I have noticed you. You are distinct from everything else in my world and you matter enough to have a word. We have always assumed that this was a one-directional act, that we named the wild things, and the wild things simply were unnamed, unaware of us as individuals, indifferent to the specific human watching from the kitchen window. What the science is telling us, with increasing clarity and specificity, is that this was never true. The birds in your yard named you. Not in ceremony. Not in the way we would. But in the only language they have, a precise, information-dense, socially transmitted acoustic signal that refers specifically to you and no one else. They built that signal from observation, from memory, from the accumulated experience of watching you move through the world they also move through. They decided you were distinct enough, significant enough, real enough in their world to be worth a word. You have a name in the language of your yard. You have had it for longer than you knew. And every morning when you step outside and the birds adjust, when the call changes, when the flock reorients, when the chickadee on the nearest branch tilts its head and looks directly at you, that is the moment your name is being used. Not spoken to you. Spoken about you. Because you are a known presence in a world that was here before you and will be hereafter. And the creatures who live in it, the ones you have been feeding and watching and quietly loving from the other side of the glass, have known you all along. Tell me in the comments, have you ever noticed the birds in your yard react the moment you step outside? That shift in the sound before you've done anything at all? Describe it. Tell me what bird it was and what you heard. Because I want to know, and so does everyone else here who is realizing for the first time that the yard was never as quiet as they thought. If this made you think of your yard differently, if you're going to step outside tomorrow morning and actually listen for the change, share this with someone who loves their birds. They deserve to know they have a name too. Thank you for being here at Backyard Birds Whisper. I'll see you in the next one.